A few days ago, The Independent broke this story, that the UK government is considering introducing 1% deposit mortgages in order to help first-time buyers get onto the property ladder. The reaction to this has been mixed, and today I want to look at what the particulars of the scheme might look like, and if this is really going to help first-time buyers.
But what we've never had is people borrowing this much.
Let's start right here with this document, released in March 2021, that outlines the details of the mortgage guarantee scheme. I think if this 1% plan was to come in, it would be an extension or revision of this scheme to make it more generous or lenient. The mortgage guarantee scheme was first introduced in 2013 as a response to the reduction of high loan-to-value mortgages post-2008. Prior to 2008, you didn't even need a deposit in many cases to get a loan. So the government between 2013 and 2016 said, if you offer the ability to borrow at 5% down, then we will provide lenders with the option to purchase a government guarantee that compensates them for the portion of their losses in the event of a foreclosure. They claim it helped 100,000 people get onto the ladder, and when they reintroduced it in 2021 as a response to the collapse of higher loan-to-value loans in response to COVID, as you can see on the chart here, they remarked, as well as being a tried and tested approach for reinvigorating the high loan-to-value mortgage market, the scheme design will be familiar to lenders, enabling them to quickly begin offering 91 to 95% mortgage products. 99% is a high loan-to-value. They've done it before with this scheme, and lenders understand it. This is why I think if these 99% mortgages were to come in, it would be this sort of scheme. Now, I could be wrong. They could instead use an extension of one of the other schemes, like a help to buy loan or something like this. But whatever the format, should first-time buyers be excited by this? From a purchasing perspective, there are two main affordability problems when it comes to buying a house here in the UK. There is the struggle in building up a deposit, and then there is also the concern around general affordability itself. Most mortgages require 10% down, and most mortgage providers will give you a multiple of your income, typically around 4.5 times whatever you earn, as a figure that you can borrow as a maximum. So let me use London as an example, because this is the part of the UK where you could argue that the housing crisis is the most acute.
First-time home buyers can't afford to live in London.
Last year, the average apartment sold for £568,543, according to Rightmove. So with a deposit of 56k, which is 10%, you would need to borrow £512,000. That means you need a total income of £113,000 to buy that flat based on that deposit. If you reduce the deposit down to £5,600, which is about 1%, you then need to borrow £562k, and now you need an income of £125,000. Lower deposits make the affordability problem worse, and I would take a guess that lenders will be stricter on the affordability criteria for people with a 1% deposit. My question is, how many first-time buyers are sat there in London at the minute going, I earn 200k a year, but what's stopping me from getting on the property ladder is the ability to save up 5k. Now, London is a unique example, but I just wanted to highlight how making deposits smaller, you don't make the problem go away. In fact, you make the other issue, the affordability issue, potentially worse. Skipton Mortgages introduced a 100% scheme where you needed no deposit, and as part of their application process, they looked to see if you were maintaining your rent payments. Maybe that's one solution to this, but I would encourage anyone to really consider ever taking out a product like this. While it might seem attractive to put less money down, you will pay a higher interest rate for the privilege of this. Within this mortgage guarantee document, again, we can see the commercial fee that the government applies to lenders for access to the scheme. That's a cost that's going to be passed on to the borrower. Also, you're going to put yourself in a precarious position. The property market is currently trending downwards. Prices are stagnant at best and falling realistically, and we all know that by now. Jumping into property with only 1% skin in the game, at a time prices seem to be moving the opposite way to you, seems like a recipe for a negative equity position, trapping you in that home potentially. The current rules around affordability multiples and income and deposit levels stop the sort of lending that we saw pre-2008. If the government steps in and says, we will insure your losses, essentially removing the risk from the lenders, what safeguards do we have to stop them just throwing out loans? Look no further than the bounce-back loans during COVID. The government just greenlit lending and said, don't worry, we will cover any losses, and banks literally chucked money out the front door. Now, on balance, the current legislation around the mortgage guarantee scheme does state this. Lenders will also take a 5% share of net losses above this 80% threshold. This will help ensure that lenders are not incentivised to originate poor quality loans. But give the bank half a chance and little to no risk, and they will open those floodgates. And then my concern for individuals, everyone wants to own a home. And if this came into place, there would be people that go, wow, 1% I can now get on the ladder. But what you're doing there is taking a demographic or a section of society who have already probably been straddled with horrendous amounts of student debt and by their own admission, by participating in this scheme, showing that they can't afford to save a deposit, you're then plonking them into an expensive loan with close to zero equity as possible, handing them the keys to an asset they don't own, where they then shoulder the responsibility of any maintenance costs of that asset at a time the housing market seems to be going backwards. That just seems so risky. So why is this happening?
Vote for me!
First of all, it's not happening yet. Some of the responses to this online implies that this is already locked in, but it's a rumour at best. The original article from The Independent cites no sources, papers or statements from the government directly. The Independent just simply say they're considering it. It reminds me of the rumours around ISAs we saw last year. We had all sorts of chat about capping them at 100k, changing what you could invest in and giving separate allowances, and none of it happened. The reforms that did come in were actually quite sensible in the main. So at this point, this sits firmly in the rumour camp. I suspect the government leaks these sorts of announcements to kind of gauge the response of the public and how they land with people. I can see why this sort of policy might look like a win-win from the government's perspective. You get to appease both the conservative traditional voting base of older homeowners by not building more homes and increasing the demand for the housing stock, thus pushing house prices higher, while also giving first-time buyers the impression that they're doing something to help. It's this age-old thing that we do in this country of, oh, there's not enough supply of new homes and the demand is ever increasing. So what we'll do instead is we'll just supplement the demand instead of sorting out the supply side issues. Will this win over the younger voters? I'm not sure that it will. I think they're a bit wise to it nowadays. Only 10% of voters under the age of 50 intend to vote Tory in the next election. That's according to a YouGov poll. 8 months ago, I made a video looking at Skipton mortgages and their introduction of a 100% scheme. And I said this: because of the requirements and application criteria, I think the amount of people who will be able to get this mortgage will probably be really low. In the grand scheme of things, it's just a good way for Skipton to get a load of attention, isn't it? I think this is the same. Far more about popularity than it is about property, more about grabbing headlines than it is about getting people houses. We'll see loads more of this as the year goes on, from both sides of the political spectrum, as it's an election year. But if you're sat there at home thinking, oh, you know what, this sounds good, this 1% deposit, just question the intention behind this, because the current government's been in power for ages, and only when their back is against the wall do they look to roll out the goodies like this. If this was really about helping people, helping you, they would have done this ages ago, right? I personally think these sorts of suggestions are just full of risk for the borrower and designed solely to grab headlines and win votes. If the government really cared about first-time buyers, they would fix the problem with LISA limits at the minute that are just trapping thousands of first-time buyers, mainly in the south of England, inside of their lifetime ISAs, who can't buy a home because the limit's too low and can't take the money out either because they're penalised if they do that. That's low-hanging fruit that would help people and is an easy fix, but it doesn't grab headlines like a 1% deposit.